The arena was not meant for humans. It stood tall under a dome of alien steel, forged by species who had ruled for centuries. Around it, crowds of warriors from across the galaxy filled the seats. Their cheers thundered like a storm. Their voices rose for one champion, only the blue-skinned goddess of battle, known as Ry'valla. She had never been defeated. Her armor shimmered like night lit by stars. Her blades danced like lightning. She fought for glory, not survival. And when she saw the human opponent placed before her, she laughed, loud and proud, so the whole crowd heard. He didn't flinch. The human stood with only light armor, simple gear, and a calm face. His name was Kale, and he had no title, no royal blood, and no reason to win. Yet his eyes held no fear. They held something colder, something unspoken. Ry'valla stepped forward and grinned at him. "Do they truly send prey now to face me?" she asked in a mocking voice. Her fangs flashed in the arena light. Kale didn't reply. His grip on his blade tightened. His gaze stayed locked on her face. She noticed the silence but didn't care. To her, this was entertainment. A warm-up before the real challenges of the season. A human had never lasted more than a few seconds against her. That was the rule, and the rule had always worked. Until now, the war that brought Kale here was not his. Earth had stayed out of galactic politics for decades. But when Ry'valla's fleet attacked a trade ship holding human children, the rules changed. Earth responded with silence, then with one message: champion will be sent. No one knew what that meant. Not even Kale. He had been chosen for reasons beyond blood or fame. He was no general. He wasn't built by labs. He was a soldier forged in real dirt, fire, and failure. That made him dangerous in ways no alien could understand. When the bell rang, Ry'valla moved like a storm. Her twin blades carved air with deadly speed. She struck first, fast and sure. Kale dodged by inches. The edge of her blade sliced his side. Blood showed, and the crowd roared with approval. But Ry'valla didn't notice his stance. She didn't care that he kept stepping into her strikes instead of backing away. He wanted to be close. Too close. She pushed harder, spinning, trying to finish the match. Her strikes blurred. Sparks flew. Kale blocked with only one arm, and then it happened. His other hand moved with strange calm. A small device, hidden under his wrist, activated. The floor shifted. It wasn't a weapon. It was a gravity spike. The field tilted, and Ry'valla's perfect footwork broke for one breath. That breath was all Kale needed. His blade met her shoulder. Not deep, not killing, but enough. Her blood touched the ground. Gasps filled the arena. The crowd that once screamed now watched in silence. Ry'valla stared at the cut. Her fingers brushed the blood. She looked at Kale with eyes full of confusion and rage. Her lips curled into a snarl. "You cheated," she said through her teeth. Kale finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "I didn't know champions cheated first," he said. And with those words, the truth echoed louder than the cut ever could. This wasn't just a fight. This was a message. Kale was not there to win for himself. He stood for every ignored voice, every child taken, every rule broken by the so-called champions. And Ry'valla's blood on the ground was proof that they could bleed. The arena guards stepped forward, unsure of what came next. No one had ever touched the alien champion before. No one had ever made her step back. Kale didn't advance. He stayed still, sword down, waiting. Ry'valla could have ordered his death. She could have claimed foul, demanded his removal. But her pride wouldn't allow it. She raised her blades again. This time, her grin was gone. Now she fought not to play, but to destroy. Kale knew the next round would be different. She was awake now, no longer blind with arrogance. And that made her 10 times more dangerous. He wiped the blood from his side. It stung, but he didn't care. He only needed one more chance to finish this. Above them, The lights of the arena dimmed as the next signal rang. Round 2 was about to begin. Across the galaxy, screens lit up, broadcasting this moment to all. The human had drawn blood from the perfect warrior. The impossible had already begun. The crowd remained silent for a few long seconds after Ry'valla's blood hit the sand. Some didn't believe it was real. Others waited for someone to shout that it was fake. But there it was, bright and real. A single cut that shook their belief in her perfection. Ry'valla stepped back slowly, feeling the sting in her shoulder. Her hand trembled slightly, not from pain but from disbelief. She had trained for decades, fought across systems, ended wars with a single duel. Never once had she been touched like this. Kale stood tall, his blade lowered. He did not cheer or taunt. His eyes were calm, as if this moment meant nothing, but it meant everything. Every champion in the stands was now watching with new eyes. The human had become a threat. She charged again, this time with fury instead of pride. Her strikes were wild, yet still skilled. Blades flashed, slicing air with deadly grace. Kale blocked with clean movements, not wasting strength. Each of his steps drew her closer to the edge of control. The crowd began to roar again. Not for Ry'valla, not for Kale, for the fight itself. They had never seen her challenged like this. For the first time, it was not a display of dominance. It was survival. Kale ducked under a sweeping slash and drove his knee into her side. She stumbled, then turned and caught him across the cheek with her elbow. Blood sprayed from his lip, but he didn't fall. He just smiled, and Ry'valla hated that smile. "You think you can win this?" she snarled as their blades locked. Her breath was hot, her arms burning from strain. Kale leaned close and spoke quietly. "I don't need to win. I just need to show them you can lose." Her eyes widened. That wasn't the voice of a soldier chasing glory. That was the voice of someone sent with purpose. Someone carrying a message written in defiance and sharpened by pain. Ry'valla roared and pushed him back. Their weapons clashed again, metal ringing across the arena. She was faster, but he was patient. She was stronger, but he was smarter. And that balance started tilting in his favor with every second. The judges above watched nervously. This match was no longer sport. It had become a question of power. If Kale won, everything would change. The rules, the rankings, the pride of Ry'valla's people, it would all crumble. Kale ducked another swing and slid beneath her legs. He spun and kicked her from behind. She hit the ground, rolled, and came up swinging. The cut on her shoulder had reopened. Blood ran down her arm. He stood ready again, blade steady. Ry'valla could see the movement in his eyes. He wasn't just reacting. He was studying her, learning every habit, every error. He fought like someone who didn't believe in fate. He made his own path. She tried a feint, a move that had fooled hundreds before him. Kale didn't bite. Instead, he countered with a short jab that nicked her leg. Another drop of blood hit the floor. The crowd gasped. "Stop playing, Ry'valla," someone shouted from the stands. A champion from the Crimson Order stood, his face full of shame. "End this now before he breaks your name." Those words cut deeper than Kale's blade. Ry'valla felt the heat in her chest rise to fury. She didn't come this far to be pitied. Her pride burned hotter than her wound. She tightened her grip on her blades. Kale saw it. He saw the fire in her return. But this time, it was no longer arrogance. It was desperation. She would kill him now if she could. He adjusted his stance, heart pounding but hands calm. They clashed. Once more, and their blades locked. Ry'valla pressed down, trying to force him to his knees. Kale leaned into her, his face inches from hers. "You bleed just like us," he whispered. With a sudden twist, he dropped and pulled her off balance. She hit the ground hard, her armor scraping the stone. Kale didn't strike. He stood back, breathing hard, watching her rise. This wasn't over. But something had shifted. Ry'valla no longer looked at him as prey. She looked at him as a rival, as a threat, as something new. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she would win. Asterisk. The silence between them grew louder than the noise around them. Ry'valla wiped the blood from her lip and looked at Kale not with anger, but with something colder. Her pride had taken 2 hits now, and the crowd no longer cheered with full confidence. Kale's blade rested by his side. He didn't move forward or backward. He simply watched her breathe. Every second she hesitated worked in his favor. He wasn't rushing to finish the match. He was breaking her rhythm. Her foot slid slightly as she reset her stance. The pain in her leg was sharp now. She had fought through worse, but not like this. Not against a human who moved like he didn't fear death. She hated that about him. Crowd began to murmur. Some of the high-ranking warriors were now quiet. Others leaned forward, studying Kale like a new puzzle. No one had expected this. No one had believed a human could make Ry'valla bleed twice in a single fight. A horn sounded overhead. It was the signal for the next stage. Now the arena terrain would change. Pillars rose from the ground. Smoke hissed from the vents. The battlefield became tighter and less open. Visibility was reduced. Kale moved first this time. He darted behind one of the tall pillars and vanished into the fog. Ry'valla narrowed her glowing eyes and followed with caution. Her armor made her steps heavy, but her instincts were still sharp. She rounded one column and swung fast. Her blade struck air. Kale had already moved again. Her breathing grew heavier. Not from exhaustion, but from frustration. She was being hunted in her own domain. Kale wasn't attacking. He was testing. Every step he made was to read her habits. Every dodge helped him learn her rhythm. He was looking for the opening she didn't even know she had, a sound behind her. She spun and parried just in time. His blade scraped her shoulder. A third wound, not deep, but enough to sting. She screamed in anger and charged with full force. Her blade slashed fast, but Kale kept backing away. "You hide," she growled. "You cut from shadows like a coward." Kale didn't answer. He rolled beneath another strike and landed behind her. His foot swept under hers. She hit the ground hard. Kale didn't strike her while she was down. He stepped back. That choice confused her more than his attack. In her culture, mercy was weakness, but Kale's actions weren't mercy. They were statements. She stood slowly, blood dripping from her mouth. The arena camera zoomed in on her face. Galaxies away, warriors and rulers watched their champion struggle against a nameless human. "What do you want, human?" she asked, her voice bitter. "Fame? Fear? A title you don't deserve?" Kale finally spoke again. His voice was steady and clear. "I want the galaxy to see what happens when a lie meets the truth." Ry'valla blinked. That line hit her deeper than any blade. Was she the lie? Was her legend built on enemies too weak to challenge her? She had believed herself a warrior of honor. But now doubt crept in. Kale moved again. This time he didn't dodge, he struck. Their blades met with a loud clash, sparks flew. They spun in tight circles, pillars cracked from their force. The crowd began to rise again. But this time, many were cheering for Kale. He had become more than just an opponent. He had become a symbol. A voice for those who had been crushed by champions who abused their power. Ry'valla's attacks were still fast, still fierce. But her focus was breaking. Kale ended a strike on her ribs. She gasped, dropping one blade. He stepped back again, waiting for her to pick it up. She did, with trembling fingers. Her breath shook as much as her balance. "You fight like a soldier," she said, "but your eyes speak like a judge." Kale lowered his blade for a moment and nodded once. "Because I didn't come here to win your title. I came to tear down the throne beneath it." The crowd went silent again. That line echoed through the air like thunder. For a heartbeat, even Ry'valla didn't move. Her hand clenched her blade tighter, and her lip curled with rage. Then she attacked again with everything she had. Kale blocked the first strike, then the second. But the third slipped past and slashed across his chest. Blood poured down his armor. He fell to one knee. Ry'valla raised her sword to finish him, and in that final second, Kale smiled. Kale's smile in that moment was not one of arrogance. It was not made of pride or defiance. It was something colder, something final. It was the kind of smile that says one truth: he was ready. Ry'valla raised her sword high. Her blood was dripping, her lungs burned. Her pride screamed louder than her wounds. She had trained all her life for moments like this, the moment of victory, the moment of dominance. But as her sword began to fall, Kale moved, not fast, not strong, but precise. His left hand grabbed the broken piece of his armor and flung it upward. It struck her in the eyes, just enough to blind her for a blink. That blink was all he needed. His body shifted left, blade coming from below. Her sword slashed air as his cut traced a line across her side, a deep cut, one that made her cry out for the first time. The crowd gasped. Champion stood in shock. Her armor cracked under the blow. Ry'valla stumbled back, grabbing her side, trying to stop the blood. She dropped to one knee. It was not a choice. It was instinct. Her body had failed her pride. Kale stood tall. His own wounds still poured blood. His breath was unsteady. But he stayed on his feet. That alone was enough to shake the galaxy watching through their screens. "You could have ended me," she hissed. "Why didn't you strike true?" Kale walked slowly toward her, blade still raised. His voice was quiet but strong. "Because you weren't my enemy. Your image was." Ry'valla looked up, her eyes glowing with pain and disbelief. She had thought herself invincible. Now she saw her reflection in the eyes of a human who did not fear her anymore. The arena fell silent again. The match was not over by rule, but by truth. It was. The champion was on her knees. The challenger still stood. The laws of combat mattered little now. What mattered was what came next. Kale extended his sword, placing the tip just above her shoulder. She didn't move. Her fingers twitched, her face pale. She could barely hold herself upright. He had won without killing her. The judges hesitated. Never before had they needed to rule against their own champion. Never before had one of them bled so deeply in front of the world. And never had a human been the cause. Ry'valla's lips parted. A sound came, not in rage, but in surrender. "Do it. Strike me. Take the title and finish this shame." Kale shook his head and lowered his sword. "No, you bleed. That's enough." The galaxy saw. Her head bowed low. The pain in her body couldn't match the sting in her soul. She had mocked him. She had laughed before the first blade was drawn. Now her name would be forever marked by his defiance. Kale turned his back and walked away from her. Each step echoed through the arena like a drum. No one stopped him. No one dared. Not after what they saw. Not after he stood against her and remained standing. A single horn blew from the high tower. The announcer's voice trembled. "The match is over. Combatant Kale of Earth is declared victor by submission of the reigning champion Ry'valla." The crowd was torn between cheers and stunned silence. Some honored his victory. Others stayed frozen, their faith in Ry'valla shaken to the core. Kale walked through them, all like a storm had passed and left only stillness. She was lifted gently by two arena healers. Her eyes didn't meet theirs. She stared down at the blood on her hands. It was hers, not her opponent's. And that was a wound she could not cover with armor. Behind her, Kale stopped at the arena gate. He looked back one last time, not with hate, not with pride, but with calm, as if to say this was never personal. It was always About truth, Ry'valla finally raised her head. Their eyes met for one final second. In that moment, she did not see a human. She saw a warrior who had faced the galaxy's best and didn't kneel. And a part of her respected that more than she wanted to admit. Kale returned to the holding chamber behind the arena. His steps were heavy. His chest still bled, but his eyes stayed sharp. He did not celebrate. He did not collapse. He simply sat on the bench and exhaled like a soldier after war. Medics rushed to him, trying to apply sealant to his wounds. One tried to speak, but Kale lifted a hand. He didn't want words. Not yet. He wanted quiet. The pain was real, but it reminded him that he had survived something most thought impossible. The doors sealed behind him. The noise of the crowd faded. The weight of what he had done began to settle on his shoulders. He had not just fought a champion, he had shifted a throne. And now the throne would fight back. Ry'valla lay inside her private chamber, surrounded by silence. The healers had done their work, but her wounds still burned. More than her skin, it was her pride that ached. Her legend was broken in front of the galaxy. A message blinked on her console. The High Council was calling her. She didn't answer. Not yet. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, seeing the dried blood on her jaw. She reached up and wiped it slowly with the back of her hand. How? She whispered to herself. She replayed every move in her mind. Every shift of weight. Every mistake. She realized now that Kale hadn't just won with skill. He had won with patience. With understanding. He knew her before she even began. She clenched her fists. Her body trembled, but not with rage, with something worse. With fear. Fear of losing more than a fight. Fear of becoming irrelevant in a world where humans were no longer prey. The High Council finally entered without waiting for permission. 5 beings stood tall in glowing robes. Their faces were hidden behind ceremonial masks. One of them spoke in a cold voice. "You have shamed your legacy." Ry'valla stood slowly. Her knees hurt, but she didn't show it. "I lost a fight, that's all." The tallest among them stepped forward. "You didn't just lose. You bent the knee to a species we considered beneath us." Her jaw tightened. She had expected anger, but this felt like betrayal. "I honored the laws of combat. He won, I submitted. That is the way of warriors." The council didn't agree. "You let weakness speak for all of us." "That cannot be allowed." Behind them, a holoscreen played a replay of Kale's final strike. The angle showed his restraint, his mercy, his dominance. Billions across the stars had seen it. And worse, many admired it. Ry'valla looked away. "What do you want from me?" she asked. The council leader's voice was sharp. "You must redeem your name. You must crush him in a rematch. This time no mercy, no rules, no arena. End him where the crowd cannot see." Her eyes narrowed. "You want and me to assassinate him?" There was silence. Then the shortest among them spoke. "We want you to remind the galaxy that champions are not to be mocked. By anyone. Especially by humans." Ry'valla didn't answer. She felt torn. Her honor screamed against it, but her fear whispered louder. If she refused, they would strip her of everything. She would be forgotten, replaced, her name erased from the warrior halls. She nodded slowly. "Where is he now?" The council replied with a single word. "Gone. Escorted off-world. But we tracked his ship. He heads to Earth's outpost in Sector Thaler 9. You will intercept him there." Ry'valla turned and looked out the window. The stars stretched endlessly before her. She remembered Kale's eyes. Not afraid, not angry, just full of purpose. He hadn't fought for himself. He fought for a message. She wondered if he would still fight, if he knew she was coming again. Not in an arena, not with an audience, but in silence, in shadow, with no laws to protect him. Back in his quarters aboard a transport ship, Kale lay on a narrow bed, his wounds wrapped. His sword nearby, his mind wasn't resting. He knew it wasn't over. He had humiliated a champion. That kind of act never ended quietly. He closed his eyes, but his hand stayed on the hilt of his blade. Thaler 9 was a quiet outpost on the edge of known space. Built into the side of a frozen canyon, it was used mostly for rest, refuel, and relay. Few travelers stopped here unless they wanted silence or secrets. Kale walked through the cold corridors with a limp in his left leg. His chest still ached beneath the bandages, but he refused to show weakness. The local guards nodded at him with respect. News of his victory had reached even this far. He said little as he passed through the main hallway. Every camera he passed made him uneasy. He knew that honorless revenge would follow his public victory. Ry'valla's pride would not let it rest. Nor would the council above her. Inside a private chamber, Kale sat at a simple metal table and reviewed maps of the region. His ship needed repairs, but more importantly, he needed to think. He needed to prepare for what might come in the dark. Ry'valla's ship entered Thaler 9's outer range 2 hours later. She came alone. No banners, no escort. She flew under a false name. Her armor was darker now, stripped of color and title. She wasn't here as a champion. She was here as a hunter. The moment her boots touched the icy landing pad, she felt the pressure of the place. Cold, isolated, perfect. She kept her hood up and her eyes low. She carried no sword in public, only a hidden dagger across her back. Local merchant recognized her face. He whispered her name to a traveler beside him. Within minutes, word moved through the outpost like smoke. Some thought it was a lie. Others believed something worse was coming. Kale heard the rumor before nightfall. He didn't panic. He didn't pack. He simply stood and faced the door. If Ry'valla had come for him, then this place would not stop her. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. That night, snow fell over the glass dome above the sleeping outpost. The streets were empty except for quiet patrols. Somewhere near the loading docks, a light flickered and went out. Footsteps crunched gently over frost-covered ground. Kale waited in the meditation hall. It was a wide circular chamber built for silence and thought. Torches lined the walls. The heat from the floor kept the space warm. He knelt in the center with his sword placed beside him. The door opened with a soft hiss. Ry'valla stepped inside. Without a word, her hood fell back. Her eyes were sharp. No audience, no judges, just them. Kale rose to his feet slowly. "You knew I would come," she said. Kale nodded once. "I would have too if I were you." She took a step forward. Her hand brushed the hilt behind her. Kale did not reach for his weapon. "You want revenge," he said. "But you don't want to be a murderer." Her jaw clenched. "I didn't come for a duel. I came for justice." He looked her straight in the eye. "You lost with honor. What justice is left to take?" She hesitated, just for a moment. And in that hesitation, Kale stepped forward and closed the space between them. "You're not the weapon they sent. You're the warrior they forgot how to respect." Ry'valla blinked. Something in her chest cracked, not from pain but from memory. She remembered her first fight, the roar of the crowd, the pride in her mother's eyes. She remembered why she had fought in the first place. "I should kill you," she whispered. Kale's voice was calm. "Then do it." She pulled her blade free in one smooth motion. It shimmered under the firelight. She raised it high, ready to strike. Kale didn't move. Her arm shook. Her breathing broke. She lowered the blade slowly, then dropped it. It clattered against the stone. She sank to her knees before him. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said. Kale sat beside her and placed the blade gently across his lap. "Then let's both figure it out before they turn us into something we're not." The two warriors sat in silence for what felt like an entire cycle. The firelight flickered across their faces. Ry'valla didn't speak again, and Kale didn't push. Some battles required stillness before the next strike could be chosen. Outside, the storm howled against the dome above. But inside, the air remained still. The tension between them wasn't gone, it had only changed shape. What had begun as a clash of blades had become a question of identity. Ry'valla finally broke the silence. "They will come for me if I don't." "Return with your head," Kale nodded slowly. "And if you do return with it, they'll use your victory to start another war." She looked down at her empty hands. She had always known what to do before. Fight, win, obey. Now her path was filled with uncertainty. She had followed orders her entire life. But something about Kale's eyes made her question everything she once trusted. "You beat me," she said. "Not just in the arena, but here." She touched her chest, just over her heart. "You struck something no blade had ever reached." Kale didn't smile. His voice was firm. "Because I didn't fight your body. I fought the story they wrote for you." Her breath hitched as she processed the truth. She had lived as their weapon, their symbol. She had never asked who she was beneath the title of champion. Until now, she hadn't needed to. Kale stood slowly and moved to the nearby table. He poured water into a small metal cup and handed it to her. She took it without a word. Even the smallest act of kindness now felt like a rebellion. "You don't have to run," Kale said. "But you can't go back either." She took a long sip and lowered the cup. Her voice was rough. "Then where do I go?" He looked toward the exit. "Where you choose. Not where they point." The words settled in her like a stone dropped in water. She had never had that choice before. Freedom sounded beautiful but terrifying. Still, she felt a small flicker of hope she had never known before. The chamber door opened with a mechanical hiss. Kale turned fast, blade in hand. But it was not an enemy. It was a transmission drone bearing the seal of the Galactic Council. It floated in slowly, projecting a red light on the wall. A voice filled the room, cold, hollow, commanding. "Ry'valla, your failure is public. Your hesitation is treason. You are hereby marked for removal by any means required." Her face didn't change. She had expected this. Kale stepped between her and the drone. "She's under my protection now," he said. The drone's voice ignored him. "Earth has no authority here. Step aside or face consequence." Kale raised his blade. Ry'valla stood beside him. "He doesn't need to protect me. I choose to stand with him." Her voice was strong again. Not as a soldier, not as a symbol, but as someone who had found her will. The drone recorded the declaration, then silently left. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Kale finally turned to her. "They'll come soon." More than a drone. Maybe assassins, maybe worse. She nodded once. "Then let them come," she said. "I won't run." He offered a second blade from the table. She took it and slid it into her belt without hesitation. The spark in her eyes returned. But now it burned. For something new, they moved through the halls together, past guards and empty rooms. Whispers followed them. Two warriors who had once been enemies now walked as allies. The station trembled with rumors of rebellion and legend. In the command center, Kale sent a message to Earth's Defense Alliance. A warning, a promise. Galactic interference confirmed. Rogue agents active. We may need extraction. The reply came quickly. Understood. Hold position. Reinforcements en route. Ry'valla leaned against the wall, watching him work. For the first time in her life, she followed no command. She stood where she chose. And she had chosen to stand beside the one who made her bleed. Kale stood near the edge of the station's outer platform. The frozen wind cut across his face, but he didn't flinch. The stars above Fowler 9 were brighter tonight. Maybe because something was about to end, or maybe because something new was about to begin. Ry'valla stood beside him, wrapped in a long cloak. Her armor was hidden underneath, but her new blade hung visible at her hip. She no longer wore the crest of her council. She had torn it off with her own hand. They watched in silence as a ship entered orbit. Not one of Earth's. It was sleek and black without markings. The kind of ship used when rulers didn't want to leave fingerprints. Kale's fingers gripped his weapon tighter. "This won't be a warning," he said. "They'll send killers, not messengers." Ry'valla didn't blink. "Then we send a message of our own." Her voice held no fear now. Only fire. The enemy ship docked quietly. No alarm was raised. No broadcast made. That silence said everything. The threat had come to erase them before the galaxy noticed. Kale and Ry'valla moved toward the hangar without hesitation. Inside the main hallway, they spotted movement. 3 figures, clad in dark armor, faces hidden. Their weapons were already drawn. One of them pointed toward Kale, the others fanned. Out preparing to attack from both sides, Ry'valla acted first. She moved like thunder. Her blade met the first assassin's neck in a clean sweep. Kale followed, sliding beneath a swing and driving his blade upward into the gut of the second. The last assassin didn't run. He turned and fired. A blast of red energy slammed into Ry'valla's shoulder. She stumbled but stayed upright. Kale shouted and tackled the shooter to the floor. They wrestled until Kale twisted his arm and snapped it clean. Blood stained the floor. The silence returned. 3 dead. No questions asked. Kale stood slowly, breathing hard. Ry'valla leaned against the wall, gripping her burned shoulder. But she was smiling. "They thought we'd break," she said. "They still don't understand what makes us strong." Kale helped her stand straight. "They see soldiers. They don't see people." She nodded through the pain. Alarms suddenly echoed through the station. Not from the attackers, but from orbit. A fleet was arriving. Earth's colors, reinforcements. The Council's time to silence had ended. The galaxy was now watching. Kale and Ry'valla made their way to the command deck. Officers stood in awe as the 2 warriors entered, side by side. The broadcast system was already open. Thousands of systems tuned in. Ry'valla stepped forward without waiting. "I am Ry'valla, former champion of the galactic arena. I speak. Now not for pride, but for truth. I was raised to believe others were beneath me, that humans were weak, that power alone made rulers. I was wrong." Kale stood behind her. He said nothing. This was her moment. Her voice shook, but her eyes did. "Not. I bled at the hands of a human, not because I was weak, but because I had stopped growing." He reminded me what strength really means. She turned and looked into the camera. Her face was tired, bruised, but honest. "I reject the Council. I reject the lies I was told. And I choose now to fight not for glory, but for unity. And I will not stand alone." Kale stepped beside her. He placed his hand on the control panel and sent out a message. "To those who hide behind titles and fear the truth, your time is ending. The galaxy deserves better than rulers who murder in silence." Across star systems, millions watched. On some worlds, warriors saluted. On others, crowds gathered in silence. And on Earth, a child looked up at a screen and whispered the names of 2 warriors now remembered by all. The Council's ship withdrew from orbit. Their attack had failed. Their silence had failed. And their control began to crack as Ry'valla see. Words spread like fire. In the days that followed, more champions spoke out. Some surrendered their titles. Others joined Ry'valla and Kale. A movement had begun. Not for war, but for truth. Not for power, but for choice. And in the quiet of the Thaler-9 night, Ry'valla sat by the fire once more. Kale sat beside her. No words were needed. She looked at the scar on her shoulder. He looked at the one across his chest. Both had bled for something bigger than pride. The human had made her bleed once. But now he had helped her heal.